We're just not good enough. We're not even close, honestly.
For us to be on the receiving end of the disrespectful comments and antics is completely unfair to us.
When we have certain guys in the mix that don't want to buy in all as one, it's going to be hard to do anything good as a basketball team.
I love this city. I literally done everything that I can. The situation is something that I don't think can be fixed.
Breaking news tonight. James Harden has been traded.
He gets his wish in every way. The trade to the Brooklyn Nets in a blockbuster deal that's going to have ripple effects throughout the NBA.
All right, Joel, here's the breakdown of the trade. Harden lands with the Nets, obviously. The Rockets get a package including Victor Oladipo, 4 first-round picks, 4 first-round swaps. Indiana gets Karis LeVert, while Cleveland gets Jared Allen and Taurean Prince. On that note, we bring in Richard Jefferson. RJ, it's been a good minute. Good to see you. Happy
it's good
New
to
Year.
see you
Hope all
guys.
is well. I will get to you, in just a minute, sir, but I'm going to start with Max. Max, are the Rockets winners or losers after this Harden trade?
They're winners in this trade, and it's because, look, the history of the NBA is whoever gets the best player in the deal wins the deal, right? So we start with there. We start with that. You want the best player in the deal. But the history also is, especially the modern history, if a superstar wants to get traded, he's not only going to get traded, a superstar, an MVP caliber player, he's going to go exactly where he wants. AD eventually, it took a while, got to LA, didn't he? Right? Because they let the other teams know he ain't going to re-sign with you. He's going to re-sign with LA. They traded him to LA, and they got what they could. Same thing with Harden. You said Brooklyn. No. Where did he wind up? In Brooklyn. And that's because once they become free agents, even if it takes another year or two, they're just going to sign there anyway. LeBron, KD, they go where they want to go. So that's what the Rockets were working with. And what did they get in exchange? They got not just LeVert, who turned into Oladipo. Let's not forget, I know he's coming off a catastrophic injury. Oladipo's only 28 years old. And Oladipo, not all that long ago, was the best player on a dangerous playoff team. Like, he's very good when healthy, if he can get back to what he was. And, more importantly even, 4 first-round picks, unprotected. Now, the first 2 aren't going to be much because Brooklyn's going to be really good. The Milwaukee pick won't be much, or at least the first one for Brooklyn, and the first one, the one they got from Milwaukee, because Brooklyn had Milwaukee's pick, ain't going to be great. Those are going to be good teams. But by 2024, do we know what Brooklyn's going to be? By 2026 and 7, do we know what Brooklyn's going to be? Because not only did they get 4 picks, they have 4 unprotected first-round swaps. So if Brooklyn winds up with a better pick than Houston gets to trade. And given the age of the roster and what they gave up, Brooklyn's going to be really good for a little while and then probably not so good. Houston, considering the way their hands were tied, made off like bandits here. They got a haul.
Max, you think about the haul and you're thinking about picks, and I respect that. I get where you're coming from, and I'm not trying to sit up there and say that I disagree because I don't want to classify them as losers. But for the purposes of this conversation, the question that was presented to us, I'd lean towards that than winning because of this. All of those things you mentioned involve unknown entities outside of Victor Oladipo. And I know Victor Oladipo can ball. We still haven't seen him return to the Victor Oladipo we know and love because obviously he ravaged that knee and he's getting back, and props to him because he's still averaging over 20 a game. He didn't want to be in Indiana anymore. They couldn't work out. A contractual situation. Neither side could come to an accord, and we get all of that. So you're going to get him, and pairing him with John Wall, who I've been very pleased by. I like what I've seen from John Wall, and I think he's only going to get better and better, to be quite honest with you. But the bottom line is this. You don't really have a known entity. All of those picks, what are they going to manufacture into? I'm a Knicks fan, as you well know, and I wish Obi Toppin nothing but the best. And, I think that he's got potential. But everybody knows I was on the record wanting Tyrese Halliburton. And look at what he's doing in Sacramento right now. You just don't know who's going to draft who and how it's going to work out. You have to wait and see. The Houston Rockets had an opportunity to get Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons would have come along with another player. Ben Simmons and another player, maybe like that kid Maxey out of Kentucky or somebody else, along with a draft pick or 2, I think could have been better. And I think James Harden forced their hand, even though they were talking about it. He expedited the process and prevented them from dragging their feet any longer by doing and saying the things that he did and said, which I don't necessarily applaud. But I totally understand what he was doing in terms of trying to get the hell out of Houston. In the end, what it comes down to is that Ben Simmons doesn't shoot. He does everything else. he's special. And if I got an opportunity to get my hands on somebody like a Ben Simmons, and I can get somebody else who can play and shoot the basketball along with a couple of picks, and I'm not saying definitively that they could have had a couple of picks. I know they could have had at least one, but Philly had all their picks available to them. They weren't willing to unload both Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. It was just going to be Ben Simmons and another player, one of their younger guys. I think that potentially might end up having been a better option than just loading up on a bunch of picks because they're unknowns, particularly with the state of college basketball being what it is right now. I just think that I would have gone the route of a surefire dude that I know could get it done on a night in, night out basis. That's just me.
Yeah, no, Stephen, I agree with you in theory. You know, when we're talking about who wins this trade, it's hard to really go into what they could potentially have gotten with other teams, right? So it's kind of like, okay, well, in this situation, who won this trade? And I was always taught, in order for it to be a fair negotiation, both sides need to walk away a bit unhappy, right? It's like you look at what Houston got. Now, they got a ton of picks. Now, understand how they got James Harden. They got James Harden because they had a ton of picks many, many years ago, and they turned those picks into James Harden. Now, a lot of times these picks aren't always used on players, and I agree with you. Tyrese Halliburton has been balling for Sacramento. He's been playing great. So that was definitely a steal, and kudos to Sacramento for pulling that one off. But when you really break down this Houston situation, maybe those picks aren't drafted players. Maybe these picks and all that you've accumulated allowed you to go get another player, allowed you to go get an all-star or an all-star caliber player. So when I look at the future and the leverage of what Houston has, I think it is fair. And I look at, Brooklyn. They gave up a lot to get James Harden, who has been disgruntled. He's not in great shape. You can see, how he kind of left the situation. So when I look at it, I think both sides got what they wanted and what they needed to help their teams move forward. And obviously there was other, you look at Cleveland getting Jared Allen. I think he's a great young big. I think he's got a ton of potential in getting Taurean Prince. So when you look at all of these moving pieces on all sides of this trade, everyone had to probably give up more than what they want, but they all got something quality back in return.
Well, first of all, they weren't, Stephen A., let's put it this way. Tyrese Maxey also in that deal, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm saying hell no. And to my knowledge, that was not offered, Simmons and Tyrese Maxey.
No, I'm not saying it was offered.
Simmons is
I'm not saying it was offered. I was just saying they were asking for it. Right. They were just asking for it. I didn't say it was offered.
But you want a piece like Ben Simmons, because you could have all the picks in the world and Ben Simmons just doesn't exist, right? And so you don't get a guy like Ben Simmons, right? But you have to consider the constraints under which the Rockets were operating. When a superstar says, I'm going to that team, believe me, he is going to that team. I've been saying this for months. Superstars, not all-stars, superstars in the NBA call the shots. They call the shots, teams got to get it through their head. And so he was going to go to Brooklyn. Now, what are you getting? And then when he expanded to Philly, maybe Philly. What are you getting back in that situation? If I were Brooklyn, I wouldn't. I think you could have gotten him for less. I think Houston played poker well against Brooklyn. Guys, they're all unprotected picks. 4 firsts and 4 swaps. All unprotected. It's more than I think they would have gotten. If you would have told me that you could wind up with LeVert, maybe one other player you want, and 2 unprotected firsts and 3 swaps or something like that, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. They got 4 and 4.
Again,
all right,
I see too many players that don't wash. Too many players that don't get it done. Right. I don't know who these dudes are. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Stephen A. wants to see results in a resume. Come on, you know this. RJ, thank you for being with us. We got a heart out here, fellas. When we come back on First Take, some MMA to dive into. Conor McGregor.